Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first session of today's instalment of Interact Virtual Festival. And our first talk from Berry Bird from GS. In Getting Stuff Done Together, Laurence and Henny are going to explore how they're working with organizations around the world to design out corporate corruption and what they've learned so far about giving meaningful support. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box and I'll ask Laurence and Henny at the end. If you have any issues with audio or connection to Zoom, then please let us know in the chat function, and please do say hello to each other there too. So over to you, Laurence and Henny.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, that description was probably the hardest bit of this talk, coming up with that. So yeah, hi, we're Henny and Laurence. So we're going to talk about the work the Global Digital Marketplace team has been doing and what we've learned about giving meaningful support to other organizations. And once we've talked about that, our experience, I'm going to share some thinking around principles for good collaboration. I think it'd be really good to have a bit of a discussion around what principles could look like, what is good collaboration. So as you might have guessed, we work for the UK government. We don't work in this building, we work here, well, in before times, for the Government Digital Service, or GDS as we call it, because we love an acronym in government. GDS is part of the Cabinet Office, and there's about 800 of us, designers, developers, researchers, policy people. And you might know some of the things that we've been behind, like gov.uk, which brought together 2,000 separate government websites from 25 odd ministerial departments and hundreds of agencies into one site, which was built on accessible research-based patterns. You might have heard of other platform products like gov.uk Notify or Pay, and they're kind of products that solve things once for government. We normally talk about how we've built services like these to meet users' needs, but today we're going to talk about how the tools and processes that were put in place when GDS was set up are really about designing out opportunities for corruption and stopping bad practice. So this is Marlene Fox back in 2010. She was asked to do a review of how DirectGov, I don't know if you remember DirectGov, the orange website, which was a precursor to gov.uk, was how it was performing and how it could be improved. She discovered that it wasn't meeting users' needs, and to do so, she proposed a revolution, not evolution, to digital government. And most of what government does is providing services to citizens, and most services were, and a lot of them still are, delivered by suppliers to government. At the same time as Martha's report, the National Audit Office and the Parliamentary Committee both released their own reports that showed that government was getting ripped off, in their own words, by giving huge contracts to a handful of large suppliers. And these reports and the data in them, they were so compelling that it gained political backing from the Cabinet Office Minister at the time, Francis Maude. He said, the UK government spends more on ICT per capita than any other government, and yet the history of UK government ICT projects is littered with budget overruns and delays and functional failures. I found this quote from Gavin Hayman, who's the Open Contracting Partnership Director. I think he sums it up nicely. Procurement, it's the #1 corruption risk because it's where money, opacity, and government discretion collide. So that's a bit of the history. What have we done in the decade since then? We were given, GDS was launched and it was given control over Treasury's spend on digital and IT projects. We developed tech and service standards. We've finally been able to drop digital from this digital service standard as well. So it's just the service standard, how to design good services. And these meant we could start assuring plans before money's even spent. We built capacity and capability and skills within government. And now we have things like the GDS Academy, and we've got the Digital Data and Technology Profession and Capability Framework, which is a mouthful, but basically digital professions in government. This means we can start building our own services, but also improve our ability to speak the language of suppliers. It also meant we had the skills to properly start assessing and assuring services that were being delivered against that standard through, and we do peer-to-peer service assessment still. We made government easier and more attractive to work with. So initiatives like the digital marketplace, which is one of our products, means that government can buy the right technology and services from the right people at the right price. And this leads to smarter spending of taxpayers' money and hopefully builds better things for citizens like us. And the benefits of having these online buying platforms means that we can more easily publish open contracting data. So people can find out what's happened to contracts, who won, where the money is going. And maximum spend limits were implemented, forcing government to break big pieces of work, big contracts, into smaller pieces that could be picked up by small, medium enterprises, more agile agencies, I suppose. And the contracts themselves were completely redesigned. It might not sound very exciting, but simplifying complicated procurement contracts and documents supports a more inclusive marketplace. So not all suppliers can afford a full-time legal expert to read through a 300-page contract. And this is Roz. She was a content designer on team back in 2017. She wrote some principles for designing better legal content. This is a terrible picture. And eventually we built tools like the design system to help civil servants and suppliers meet the standards and build things that meet the standards. And remember that I said that government contracts were going to a handful of large suppliers. Well, if this map was 2010, it would have been maybe 6 dots in central London. And now you can see how all these steps that I've talked about came together to open up the market to a more diverse set of suppliers. And the reason I say all this is because it gives you an idea of the experience we've gained as an organization for tackling these problems. It also shows the context that we did this in. So we had very senior buy-in from powerful ministers, and that's quite unique to our situation. But corruption isn't unique to us. It's $2.6 trillion problem around the world, which is an incomprehensible number. And it includes things like money laundering, embezzlement, buying homes using public funds. And this is an image from an anti-corruption protest in Mexico. And this is where one case of corruption resulted in children being given water instead of chemotherapy drugs. In many places, citizens want tackling corruption high on the agenda. And this means designing better buying processes that are transparent, open, inclusive, and just fair. So the Global Digital Marketplace is part of the we're part of GDS, but we're also part of the Foreign Office's Prosperity Fund, which aims to support anti-corruption programs around the world. So our team's all about sharing what we've learned so far about making buying more fair, open, and transparent. And we partner with countries who are either trying to implement solutions similar to ones that we've faced or similar to ours, or they're facing problems similar to what we've experienced. But they all have really different needs and complete different contexts. Some have teams on the ground that are really capable of solving these problems, but there's a lack of awareness from senior levels. Some have identified problems, but they don't have the specialist skills to make the first steps. And some just want a product to solve their problems, where others might be jaded by enterprise suppliers. But they're all kind of people who want to do things differently, and they don't necessarily know where to start. This is a bit of a cheesy photo, but we support by sharing our experience in developing these solutions to problems that we both share. So we help, we get involved in exploring their needs, building awareness for things like user-centered design, and we support countries build in-house capabilities that can help them identify and develop their own solutions to digital problems. And we really want to encourage partners to share their stories so we're working globally to kind of publish these case studies, and it's a great opportunity to foster a global community outside of our Western bubble of the usual suspects of, US, DS. I've completely forgotten everybody now. But outside of our usual bubbles of kind of white Western countries. So we're building relationships, so building awareness at senior levels, like things about like open data or user-centered design. But we also do a lot of learning by doing, so helping teams solve their own problems by sharing user-centered design techniques, or like speaking to users or coming up with hypotheses. And we do a lot of peer-to-peer support, so giving continuous feedback and learning together. So here's an example where this is a very light touch peer-to-peer support where there's a country working on a design system, and they share their thinking with me, and we can bounce ideas off each other. So I can share like some of our experience in the UK, and this is, I think, a good way to collaborate, because we're not they're leading on this work. We're just there as kind of and to provide critique, I suppose, where they want it. But it's really important to understand context. So we have in-country leads, so people in the countries that we work in that are from those countries and speak those languages. But I think we can constantly explore and go deeper into how to better understand context. I've got some quotes from an article that I just read from George I, and I'll share a link to it because I think it's really good to read. But he was really exploring how to create a better definition of good design. So he said things like, how well has the project team sought to understand the cultural or historical context that led to today's reality? Or how can we make space for those without formal training to shape and control their projects themselves? And it's all about, and he highlighted that it's all about designing engagement itself, not just the outcomes, which is a lot of what we do. So I think it's really important to think about how do we make sure we're not pushing what we want to show we can deliver on others, and make sure we don't add any burden to people's work. This good design creates ownership. In my head, I've been imagining this seesaw. I don't know if it really works, to be honest, but I've put it in, so I'll share it. So in this diagram, maybe the more we do in isolation as people who are supposed to be supporting, the more weight we're putting on our end of the seesaw and leaving our partners feeling more disempowered. So if they come to us with a problem and we send a proposal for how to solve it and maybe how to build it, and this will solve your problem, that's not very empowering for them. So I was thinking maybe the reverse could be better, where they've got a problem, perhaps it's this size, and we maybe share our experience like I just did. And then we leave it to them to come up with their next steps. But that can lead to kind of disengagement as well, because we're not really seen to be delivering value to them. We're not really supporting them. So perhaps there's like a balance where, and these tasks are completely made up. Maybe we're doing activities like co-design, or procuring in-country suppliers to help deliver things. So we're going to start talking about how we've done that in another country. I think we could ask some questions. We could have some questions now, or we could just keep going and have the questions at the end.
I think, is it okay to leave questions until the end and let Henny run through her bits and then see questions?
That sounds great.
Brilliant, thanks.
Cool. Over to me, Laurence.
Go for it.
Okie dokie. Right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. As my colleague Laurence mentioned before, one of the countries that the Global Digital Marketplace worked with, pardon me, is Indonesia. So you could see a picture of me and my colleagues driving the proverbial bus at the British Embassy in Jakarta. Yeah. Next slide, please, Laurence. Yeah, so corruption. Let's not talk about corruption to start with. Bureaucracy. When we talk about government, there's always layers and layers of bureaucracy. It's the same everywhere. So this is a picture that was taken in Indonesia. Where do we start? So working with the Indonesian government, our main stakeholder is the National Procurement Agency, and they are the implementer and the regulator of public procurement in Indonesia. So everything has to go through them. In 2018, they had a major breakthrough. So they created this standardized document that they called standard bidding document, which means it's a template to be used by all government officials that want to procure anything. And it's a blessing as well as a curse, because once you've filled out the template, it could end up being like a novel. It could be about 500 pages. And as my colleague Laurence mentioned, no small, medium enterprises would be able to process that document without hiring a professional lawyer that specializes in procurement. So that's one of the challenges that they wanted us to look at. And the expectation at the beginning was for us to deliver the finished goods, which is, I mean, it's fair to expect if you've been working with donors in the past that offer such things. But we thought from the beginning that it would be better if we share our experience, and then hopefully they'll be able to do it themselves. So we had a period of negotiation, took about 2.5 to 3 months, talking about what is the best way, how do we balance showing result, but also not a one-off solution, something that can be taken forward after this, because things always change. And as this standard bidding document did, when it was issued, it soon became obsolete because it didn't factor in the e-procurement platform that was launched pretty much a few months after. So a lot of the documents within that standard bidding document was not needed anymore, but people still filled it out because they felt like if they didn't do that, then they might get in trouble. And yeah, next slide, please, Laurence. Okay, so like us, they had a very big problem with procurement documents. So I believe the UK also ran the exercise maybe about in 2016, Laurence, could you correct me if I'm wrong? So we had a contract design program. Yeah, for the same intention, basically reducing the amount of text and try and put all the most important information up front so that they can actually be processed by people who needed to do what they needed to do for procurement. Next slide, please. Laurence, sorry.
Oh, am I freezing? Sorry.
That's all right. Okay, cool. So yeah, 2.5 months to 3 months of talking to our stakeholder. They were like, just give us the simplified document, and we were like, well, let's try and do this together. Let's co-design this workshop. And we had to explain to them what we were going to do, the structure of the workshop. They were like, well, it's going to be really expensive to have about 20 people out of their daily job to attend 6 4.5 hourly sessions. But I think in the end, we managed to convince them, and they took that leap of faith. And yeah, I can proudly say that they did not regret that. We both learned a lot from each other. So you can see this basically captured the 6 days or 6 sessions worth of workshop. What we did was we dissected the bidding document into about 17 sections based on the different users, different purpose. And we were able to speak to a representative of each of those users, including suppliers, some of which came in as a surprise. So it was like session 3, and they said, we've brought in this supplier to talk to us. And we were like, we've already got a structure for today's workshop.
Yeah, that was one of the most stressful things when you wake up at 6, because it would have been 6:30 a.m. because of the time difference. So we were waking up to a text saying, oh, by the way, we've invited new suppliers, and we've had everything to. So I think being flexible is something we've definitely learned from this. And
yes, being
less script.
Definitely. So we just went with it, and it was not this disappointing at all, because we were able to get a very concrete feedback from a direct user of this tender document. And we were able to validate some of the hypotheses that we were building around the workshop. And there were quite a few actionable points at the end of the interview session as well, which we then took on to the next stage, which is prototyping. So where were we? Yeah, 6 days. Yeah, a lot of preparation that was put beforehand. We had to translate the deck into Bahasa Indonesia, because even though most of them do speak English, I think they express themselves better in Bahasa, same as me, I guess. So yeah, some of the participants really appreciated the fact that we had the deck in Bahasa and the presentation in English, even though we also had to do quite a few bit of translation along the way as well. Yeah, so next slide, please. So some of the tools that we used was Mural, as you could see on that huge board that captured the 6 sessions in the workshop. But that didn't work so well because the participants were not used to that particular tool. So what we ended up doing, which is part of adapting again, was old-fashioned pen and paper captured by camera and shared via WhatsApp.
It was so much more fun.
It was fun.
Fiddling with Mural, yeah.
Yes, so that was another breakthrough. Was that day 2? I think that was.
I think day 1 or 2, because we were doing so we designed the workshop together with the senior people on the teams, but in the day we would do a presentation on a topic like contract design pattern, and I think this was an exercise from that. So we'd do a presentation, then we'd do an exercise like this, and then maybe we'd go into applying it to our project.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was it. So the structure was we try and keep it a little bit more interactive rather than a one-way us talking at them type of format. So yeah, the outcome of the workshop was obviously the prototype, which they were able to give input towards. So another outcome was the feedback that we get from all the different users within the government and also outside the government. But what we did not really expect to get out of our workshop was the fact that we have now introduced our counterparts in Indonesia with user-centered design, which is so wonderful, because those documents that were previous, the standard bidding document itself, which was launched in 2018, was launched and was published with very good intention, but perhaps not user tested or not user tested enough. So there's definitely some positive side of this interaction between us and the government of Indonesia. And also language. We learned a lot from them.
This is me trying to follow along to things on Google Translate.
Yeah, a lot of things don't. So language is definitely one of the key challenges here, because not everything can be translated directly at Google Translate, and even using a translator may end up doing more harm if the translator is not a subject matter expert, because meanings can get lost along the way. So yeah, we took our time with this workshop. It sometimes felt like, you know, things are being said twice. Obviously they are, because in different languages, but it's very important to get it right. Next slide, please. So this is another, this is the Fringe benefit. You get feedback like this and you're like, yes, it's totally worth doing all that work. And people who did not really talk to each other within the different departments, they got to talk to each other once we've bypassed all that hierarchy business. And suppliers got to have a voice as well, which is another wonderful thing. They didn't really have that platform where they could communicate their needs. So that was great. And they will continually be involved in the future user research. So that's a picture of us with Jabar Digital Service in their newly built command center, which was fun. So yeah, this is early days. We've got that prototype currently being polished and finessed, and then they will get tested by procurement experts and lawyers, legal experts, and hopefully they will be able to do a pilot test with a subnational slash province in Indonesia, West Java or Jabar. They are one of the biggest province, so they have about 50 million people in it. So that would, if we could get them tested there, it would be amazing. We've got such good relationship. But yeah, that's pretty much the case study in a snapshot. That it's only a beginning. It's a work in progress. We are both learning loads from each other. Reflections, Laurence.
Oh yeah, you mentioned something around like relationships, and we've got to know quite a lot of people in Indonesia, and I think there's quite a lot of community. So we're not being able to just connect different bits of government together, but people from like Service Jam Indonesia and those kind of design communities as well, and kind of being connected with governments as well.
Yes, yes. So we made friends with some really talented people from Somia, who also started this community called Service Design Indonesia, and these are the people who will be hopefully very important in the future work, because yeah, we have to have allies, and we have to have friends who will help take this work forward and hopefully scale it up. So yeah, we talk about nice, good things there, but also things that we could improve on. Well, we did do a lot of planning, and we did front load a lot of work, which helped. But I think understanding the context as a team is also very important. As in, Indonesians are really polite, right? So if you ask them to go to a meeting, even on their holiday, they'll probably go for it. So it's important to actually know when those holidays are. And what else, Laurence? Oh, interviews. They don't like one-to-one interviews. They like they love
like when we're doing research and stuff. Yeah, I
yeah.
think we well, I'm from we work in GDS, and we love our standards, and are like, we've got specific ways we like to do things, processes, and this project's really teaching me that we need to be less precious and adapt things to like different cultures and contexts, and allow them to just take what they want from our processes if they want, and support them with that. Make sure that they're in control of everything they do. That's why we try and do these co-design these sessions. So we're designing the sessions, which is half the work, before doing the actual sessions. But yeah, and it takes time to build up that, to understand the context, and having people in those countries helps a lot.
Yes. Yeah. And probably would be nice to have live translator in the future. cut down on
Yeah,
it.
I think we've tried with live translation, and we've tried without. So this was without, but we've done it previously with live translation, and that was, I've never experienced anything like it, because you're talking and you can really understand what people are saying straight away, because you've got an earpiece with a translator. So that was quite an experience.
Oh. Yeah, but I guess, yeah, we're at the end of our presentation.
Yeah, I thought we could maybe have a discussion, or I'll answer some questions first, but maybe think about how might these like ways of collaboration differ if we were if you were like a private sector company, or I'd be interested in, like, have you considered power dynamics in relationships in your organization? How have you managed that? And what steps can you take to counteract like negative power dynamics? Would it look like a checklist to make sure you're prepared? I don't know. It'd be cool to start exploring some of those things together.
Thanks, Laurence, and thanks, Henny. That was a great presentation. We do have some questions in from attendees, if you're happy to answer those now. Mike asks, have you ever worked with a difficult team who do not want convincing, and how did you handle it? Have you ever terminated work with difficult teams?
My experience, work comes from, we work with embassies, the British embassies in different countries, and that's how we build initial relationships. So people are working with us because they want to generally, or they have a similar problem. But Henny, you might have more experience. You've been on the team longer.
Right, so difficult team. I mean, there's always one, right? Yeah, I would say we have worked, we've had experiences like, you know, if you're not able to convince them enough, if you don't, if they don't see value in it, then they're not going to commit their time in it. So that's usually where the difficulties are from. So it goes both ways, right? It also means that you need to maybe work, well, we needed to work a bit harder to convince them. And in this case, when I said it took us 2.5 to 3 months to get their buy-in for getting this workshop to go ahead, that was every other day of 7 a.m. calls to our stakeholder to walk them through the plan as well as the purpose, to adapt it to their needs, so that we're not giving them extra work. We are trying to plug ourselves within that gap and support their ambition. So yeah, we'll always meet challenges like that, but I guess in this case we were focused on the outcome, on what we want to achieve, and persistence is key, I would say.
I think we generally go at their pace. Definitely since COVID, we've been trying to go at the pace of our partners and not push anybody. So yeah, we're trying not to be a kind of needy partner.
So usually it's when it comes across as us pushing the agenda, that's when we get the resistance. But once we start talking their language,
be like water or whatever,
and make it more a collaboration rather than this is what's happening, then make it their problem too. Basically. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks both. And then another question which kind of follows on is, how involved is your application of co-designing? How much participation happens? And what are the key stages you are looking to include? And that's from Simon.
Well, for me, the key stage is putting things in front of people. That's the thing that I see the most, like, that seems to deliver the most change in different organizations, when they've actually put their existing service or documents or something in front of someone who has to use it. So to get to that point means maybe 5 sessions of doing like a kind of design sprint style thing. And that's quite stressful. We've kind of talked about that application of co-designing, and how we prepare. But yeah, the key stage, we really just want to get to the point where they're putting things in front of people in this kind of circumstance, if we're doing like a co-design thing. But in other projects, it might be pairing developers together to share design patterns or components, things like that. So it can really vary.
Thanks, Laurence. And Manny says, the work GDS does is really interesting, especially collaborations with other countries. How do you avoid accusations, concerns of something like digital colonialism? How do GDS and other British organisations take care to overcome suspicion from these countries of another Western power imposing their system on a native population?
That's a lot of the context there as well, because we work in countries where we have a history of colonialism. Like, well, the British have a history of colonialism in every country. So I think that's where understanding why they have certain problems, sometimes the problems in those countries, like with corruption and things, were probably caused by colonialism. I don't know, but yes, that's why we always try and make sure that the partners are leading the work, and we're there to definitely like support. And we're doing things like this to understand, like, how could we have principles to be a better supporting partner, rather than someone trying to push our own products or way of thinking on anyone. So we should be the one adapting. That's kind of our outlook anyway, but still always developing there.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a slightly irrelevant grandmother story here. But growing up, I remember our history teacher talked to us about, Indonesia was colonialized by the Dutch for 350 years and for Japanese for 3.5 years. So now in modern days, apparently, and I still need to validate this. So in Japan, a lot of people did not know this happened, because even though Indonesians saw it as Japanese came and invade us, but maybe it was a company in Japan that got the blessing from the Japanese emperor to do it, for example. But anyway, what my history teacher said was, so nowadays they do all sorts of foreign aids to try and make it up, to try and help us rebuild the country. And I mean, there's always two sides of the coin. One side will always think, oh, what is the intention behind all this? And then the other side is, oh, they've come to help us get better. And you know, you can never win them all. But for us who's involved in the program, I personally feel very fortunate because I'm Indonesian born and bred, and I'm able to get involved in making procurement more transparent. And you know, I'm just happy to be here.
Thanks, Henny. Thanks, Laurence. Another question is from Sankalita, who says, really interesting work. Thank you for sharing. Could you please talk a bit more around designing the 6-session workshops? What were the tools and frameworks and prompts that you used?
You want to take that one, Laurence?
Yeah. It's kind of like a standard design sprint, except we try and focus more on what GDS does well, because because there's no point doing a design sprint. They could read that from a book if they want. So what GDS does really well is the user research side of things, because we have like specialist user researchers. So we tend to focus on how to share like user research techniques. How did we come up with the 6 sessions? We've done the workshop before, pre-COVID, and that was basically a 5-day, we'd just book a hotel room for a week and we'd all work from there, which you might have seen some of the mad carpet in some of the photographs from those hotel rooms. And that's where, yeah, we just focused on trying to get them to the point where they could research their thing, but also have the confidence to do that. But remotely, we ended up spreading it over 6 sessions over 2 weeks or 3 weeks, rather than having people stuck in front of their computers like every day during a week. So that shaped our sessions quite a lot. But yeah, I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, also this, even though we did say 6 sessions, a lot of the work was done beforehand, so that we try and make the most of the participants' time that we had. Aside from the translation, we had a contract designer specialist who helped us, who broke down the standard bidding document into 17 sections, and we also looked at those sections individually to understand what the users were meant to be doing, what's the purpose of each of those, and what could be better, what could be done better. We're not jumping into solutions, but we thought of all the possibilities that we could thought of, and then during that workshop we used that opportunity to validate the issues and gain further input so that we could, yeah, make those sections shorter, put all the vital information up front, so that maybe the first, I don't know, 10 pages could contain all the things that you needed to know before you make a decision whether or not you go ahead in participating. Because that's usually the issue. People give up. They're like, 500 pages. I'm not even going to read it. Yeah.
I think in the workshops we were a bit ambitious, trying to get prototyping remotely using Google Docs in breakout rooms in different languages. So I think that was very stressful. I think we would do that differently next time. Somehow, I'm not sure how.
I hope that answered.
Yeah, thanks both. Another question is from Alex, who's asked, do you have a visual of the prototype? And when user testing, do you have someone with disabilities to test the prototype?
Yes, we have the prototype. It's still being developed, but so user research wise, we talk about, we've shared like how we would do user research with them. So it's really up to them how they want to take it forward. We're kind of doing more planning around that now. So the next iteration of that work is working together to understand how we test it. And if we were applying the GDS standards, one of the points is making sure everybody can use it or the service or whatever it is. So that's something we would talk about. I think in one of the screenshots, we were discussing that with one of the partners. And it's a thing that maybe they hadn't tried before or heard about. Yeah, here. So here we were talking about, often we get our products reviewed by people with accessibility needs. And they don't have these services in some places. So it's about understanding how they could create those services or ways of working, I suppose. Anyway. Yeah, the prototype's still in development. I think in one of the reflections I meant to share was we framed it as a prototype so much that they didn't see it as an iteration on their previous document. They saw it as like a new thing that was going to be better, and they wanted to prove that it was better rather than a mindset where they're iterating. And I think that's where using language like prototyping can cause problems.
Great, thanks, Laurence. And then Manny has asked, do you find that a lot of social habits or norms of the society you're working in, beyond language barriers, give rise to confusion? How do you overcome or adapt to the problems like a shy population or societal hierarchy that are created by these communication norms?
Yeah, all the time. So what we've noticed during our session was that usually when the senior officers are present, everyone tend to be quiet. So we found that breakout rooms helped, and we could see a stark difference between user research / interview that's conducted by a group with a senior leader present and one without. Yeah, so much more vocal when the seniors aren't present. So how do we work around this? Well, winning the heart of the senior leader is also quite important, I would say, because once we get their blessing, it's so much easier. And yeah, speaking their language is also quite an important thing, because being able to communicate builds that trust. So
I remember when we were preparing for the service jam, Free was telling me sometimes people in audiences in Indonesia like to know what the question you're going to ask is before you've even done your presentation. So make sure if you're going to ask any questions, raise the questions at the beginning so that people have time to like think about it. And I think that applies to is universal probably, but there's like small things that you can learn.
Yeah, and part of our team is also learning Bahasa Indonesia, and that's winning lots of brownie points.
Great, thanks both. And then John has asked, a great presentation, and how have you found maintaining the relationships and activities during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, it's had its challenges, but as mentioned previously, us Indonesians love WhatsApp. So we've got WhatsApp group, And that's worked really well, because that sort of help to make that relationship less formal as well. And it's so much easier than writing emails or having calls.
So many WhatsApp groups all around the world, and you have to remember to keep everything on silent when you're going to sleep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I definitely don't have share in WhatsApp, but it helps.
Brilliant, thank you. And then Alex just asked, could you just do a quick recap on the content rules about writing legal information? They just found the slide went a bit too fast, so if you've got a moment just to do a quick recap.
About where was this? What was it? Finding legal information.
The one
Yeah, content rules about writing legal information. I think it was quite near the beginning.
We were meant to write a blog post back in 2017 about this, and I think it just got left out. So it might be nice to push this, because each one of these principles has like quite a lot of content within them as well, which would be amazing to share. But the whole point of it is, it's not just users who appreciate plain English or plain language. Like lawyers appreciate it too, or legal people. So how can we better design things like contracts?
Great, thanks, Laurence. I have said that we'll share the recording as well, so people can kind of catch up on any of the information they want to refresh their memories with. And then the last question was just, did you ever get the cell phone mints in the end?
What does cell phone mints mean? Because we just realized what it meant.
I'm not sure. I think maybe that's a question in its own.
No, yeah, that was it was Google Translate. I've always wondered, why did it translate that?
Riddle. Brilliant. Well, thank you both for a great session. Lots of great feedback on the chat if you'd like to have a look there as well. And the recording will be shared with everyone that attended today and everyone that's signed up for other sessions this week. So yeah, thanks, Laurence and Henny, and we'll leave things there.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.